So, good morning. My name is Reverend Dr. Letiah Fraser, and most of y'all know me, but for those who don't, I get to lead the open table that meets here on the second and fourth Sunday evenings. So let's begin with prayer, but we will take this time of prayer will be 60 seconds of silence, so that we can be attuned to our bodies and prepare ourselves to listen as we are thinking about the many things we have yet to do on our to-do list. So 60 seconds of silence, and then I will call us back by closing us in prayer. God, now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all the hearts gathered in this place be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and redeemer. Amen. So I will invite us, which was fun that Sam began or led us in this imaginative exercise. So I'm going to invite us into another imaginative exercise. So imagine first that you are on the trolley trail, not too far from here. It stretches from the Country Club Plaza to 85th and Prospect, 6 miles. Many have walked, run, or biked, some or all of it. How many of us have been on this trolley trail with a friend? Can you remember when you and your friend walked the trolley trail last? And as you did you process the current events of our world, this country, this city, your life, perhaps even your disappointments with God? What did you notice? Whom did you see as you walked? What questions did you ask? Did you listen well? Were you honest? When you reached the end of your walk with your friend, did y'all decide, instead of parting ways, to go for lunch or dinner instead? Did you recognize the divine in your friend's eyes, and did they recognize the divine in your eyes as you shared a meal? When you finally parted ways, did you go home and tell others about your experience because you were so moved by your time together? This is the story of the road to Emmaus. It's a story of deep listening in a fractured world. While processing trauma and disappointment with society, religious systems, and God. So hear the word of the Lord from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verses 13 to 35. The same day, 2 of Jesus' disciples were going to a village of Emmaus, which was about 11 kilometers from Jerusalem. As they were talking and thinking about what had happened, Jesus came near and started walking along beside them. But they did not recognize who he was. Jesus asked them, "What were you talking about as you walked along?" The 2 of them stood there looking sad and gloomy. Then one named Cleopas asked Jesus, "Are you the only one from Jerusalem who didn't know what was happening these last few days?" "What do you mean?" Jesus asked. Those things that happened to Jesus from Nazareth, by what he did and said, he showed that he was a powerful prophet who pleased God and all the people. Then the chief priests and our leaders had him arrested and sentenced to die on a cross. We had hoped that he would be the one to set Israel free, but it has already been 3 days since all this happened. Some women in our group surprised us. They had gone to the tomb early in the morning, but did not find the body of Jesus. They came back saying they had seen a vision of angels who told them that he is alive. Some men from our group went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they didn't see Jesus either. Then Jesus asked the two disciples, "Why can't you understand? How can you be so slow to believe all the prophets said? Didn't you know that the Messiah would have to suffer before he was given his glory?" Jesus then explained everything written about him in the scriptures, beginning with the law of Moses and the book of prophets. When the two of them came near the village where they were going, Jesus seemed to be going further. They begged him, "Stay with us. It's already late, and the sun is going down." So Jesus went into the house to stay with them. After Jesus sat down to eat, he took some bread, he blessed it and broke it, and then gave it to them. At once they knew who he was, but he disappeared. They said to each other, "When he talked with us along the road and explained the scriptures to us, didn't it warm our hearts?" So that they got up and returned to Jerusalem. The two disciples found the 11 apostles and the others gathered together, and they learned from the group that the Lord was really alive and had appeared to Peter. Then the disciples from Emmaus told what had happened on the road, and they knew he was the Lord when he broke bread. This is the word of the Lord for the people of God. So Jesus had just been murdered by an unjust system. These two people were from a marginalized group or class. These two disciples of Jesus, they believed in his teachings, ate with him, talked with him, and most of all, they had hoped that he was the one that would free them from their oppression. The story of the two disciples on the road to Emmaus gives us insight into new ways to engage in deep listening in a fractured world, especially when we are disillusioned or disappointed. So I've been going to a spiritual director for a number of years now, and she knows that I live in my head. So she invites me at the beginning of each session to a minute of silence, just like I invited us all to just a few minutes ago. And she invites me to be present in my body and to name emotions. Now, not the good ones or the ones that I had been told were good as a kid, but ones like sadness and anger and disappointment. And she says this one question: where are those emotions located in your body? I think Jesus was probably a good spiritual director. The two disciples were invited to process their pain and trauma by moving their body and by being in conversation with one another and with God. As the disciples walked the 7-mile stretch to Emmaus, they talked and talked to one another about the trauma they had experienced. I wonder if they had seen Jesus get arrested. I wonder if they were walking alongside Jesus as he carried his cross. I wonder if they witnessed the crucifixion. I wonder if they were still there when Jesus took his last breath. During their painful conversation, Jesus shows up even though they did not recognize him. Finding ways to process trauma in our bodies in a fractured world is a way that we love ourselves and others. So what are some practical ways you may be invited to process your trauma? Taking a walk on the trolley trail or some other favorite trail with a friend? Going to see a spiritual director or a counselor? Jesus just may show up even if we don't recognize him. So I'm currently also enrolled in a spiritual director's training program. The skills that I am learning and practicing would be good for us all. Things like open-ended questions, deep listening, reframing, speaking less, listening more. I think our society would be better if we could hone some of these skills, finding ways to deeply listen in a fractured world. The two disciples were invited into mutual exchange of questions without being analyzed or having others offer solutions. While on their 7-mile track on the road to Emmaus, some questions were, what are you talking about? What are you talking about as you're walking along? What do you mean? Why can't you understand? Why is it hard for you to believe what the prophets have said? The questions allowed all three, yes, even Jesus, to process the trauma they were experiencing in their bodies. It allowed them to tell their stories and to pose theological questions without fear. How can we create and hold space for such conversations for ourselves and for others? Jesus just may show up even if we don't recognize him. During our open table gatherings, we share a meal around round tables. Folks prepare a meal in the kitchen before the gathering. So as we are chopping onions or tomatoes or cooking pasta, we are also engaging in those open-ended questions. But as the gathering starts, we sing, we share our joys and sorrows aloud, we catch up on one another's lives and engage in conversations at the intersection of faith and justice. We often stay longer than scheduled. It is around those tables that we recognize Christ in one another. The two disciples invited Jesus to share a meal. Jesus was invited to share a meal with the two disciples after their long walk because they wanted him to stay longer. It wasn't until the two disciples were communing with Jesus around the table that they recognized who Jesus was. Then Jesus disappears. Would make a really good sci-fi movie. Or perhaps this is what John Wesley, the theologian, meant when he had an encounter with God, when he said that his heart was strangely warmed. The disciples' response was to share their experience with others and to deeply listen to the experience of others that were gathered there who also had an encounter with Jesus. Amid disappointment and disillusionment, we do not need platitudes or theological certainty. Instead, we need community and table fellowship. It is then that Jesus shows up and we recognize him. Jesus just may show up for a fleeting moment, and then we recognize him. So I will invite us to take 2 minutes to turn to our neighbor. I know that the introverts sometimes don't like that. Or to reflect on your own about this question: where have you experienced Christ in another this past week? So where have you experienced Christ in another this past week? So the invitation is either to turn to your neighbor and share or to sit and reflect. And I will call us back in 2 minutes. All right, 10 seconds. Maybe finish up your last thought. Okay, so hopefully the stories that you either thought about alone or shared with friends included sharing meals with someone, or maybe taking a walk or a bike ride with someone, or caring for a child or parent. And in those times that you experienced or saw the face of Christ, I invite us maybe, instead of running out, to find somebody you weren't sitting next to and share that story with someone as you are leaving. Perhaps the next time we are on the trolley trail or some other trail, we will be intentional about processing the trauma we store in our bodies through movement and conversation with another. Let's also consider committing to practicing asking good questions and sharing table fellowship. This is an invitation to deep listening in a fractured world where we are increasingly disillusioned and disappointed. Amen.